they see what frames come through the door, they see what lenses go in which frame. But I feel like the biggest hurdle is really getting to that customer service side.
Welcome to another episode of Optometry Profits Revealed. I'm your host, Peter Precht, and today we're going to have a conversation with Nathan Hill. He's the VP of the Illinois Opticians Association. He's a 20-plus year veteran. He's the Midwest frame rep for Oliver Peoples, Alon Mickley, and Stark. And he also runs Hill Optical Consultants, which we're going to dive into some length. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the tech innovations that are embraced and at what level you see them out there with your folks that you service with being a frame rep. Without any further introduction, Nathan Hill. Good to see you, Nathan.
You as well, Peter. Thank you so much for having me.
This is awesome. I don't want to derail from you, but would you mind giving a real brief story of your mom's history and how you kind of got introduced into optical? Because I think it's an awesome story.
Yeah, absolutely. So my mom started as an optician right when she gave birth to me. So that was about, I want to say like 36 years ago, something like that.
There you go.
And I have been in the industry for about 20 years, 20 plus years. And I started at her shop when I was 14. So I started edging, I started working on a lensometer, and
Nice.
I started talking to patients as well.
I think that's so cool. In your case, it was literally a family job.
Yes.
Where you could go in and learn something, at 14, which I don't know. That's a really cool opportunity. And she came here from
Hong Kong.
I mean, I think at the time that she came here and did that. I don't know. Tip of the hat. It's pretty awesome.
Yes.
It really is. I think
Yeah.
you go
Yeah.
to a completely different place,
Right.
give birth, and let's just be an optician and run a successful practice for all these years too. So that's I think it's really awesome, and it obviously has helped guide you into what you see, for Hill Optical Consultants and what it's about and what you're trying to do. We always try to
Correct.
integrate tech into our conversations. You and I met, as has been the case with other interviews I have, but you and I met on LinkedIn, and we had conversations, a while back about things. But
Right.
I want to walk through some of the things that you told me that what to expect, from Hill Optical Consultants, and then also integrate some of the discussions about Oliver Peoples and the offices that you embrace in terms of tech. What do you see with your practices because obviously Oliver Peoples it's a high-end frame line, and they're made
Right.
really, really well.
Yeah.
Alon Mickley, Stark, talk to me about what you see tech-wise in these practices that work with you.
Yeah. I mean, tech wise, I see some offices running reports and making sure they know like what they sold and replenishing the pieces that they did sell, and then also taking a look at other pieces that are similar to what they sold and using that as a guide for when they're buying their frames. Not every practice does that. Some practices do it the old-fashioned way where they have memorized what they've sold and just repurchase it from there, or some practices just go by how they're feeling that day and buy that way.
We were talking a little bit about this, and I, I definitely have some questions about frame board management because
Mhm.
I'm not calling out everywhere I've been, but the places that I've worked and the offices that I visit, it is definitely not a high priority. And,
Right.
I mean, It shouldn't take that long to cut your fingernails if you know where the clippers are.
Right. Yeah.
And,
It's
and, and you know, there's nothing worse than knowing that you've got a frame that's perfect for someone. It's nowhere near
Mhm.
where it ought to be. It's like, oh, they should be over here, but it's not. And now you're digging through
Mhm.
trays if you're lucky. But
Right.
but let's connect this back because it was kind of we went through a couple bullet points that I think were really important to walk through. You've already hit on one. You were talking about profit margin in regards to reports, I gather. Um,
Right.
what do you do? What are you looking for when you do that analysis, I guess?
Yeah. When I have the report in front of me, I'm taking a look at what frames have turned, what frames are sitting there, for over a year.
Right.
It's very important when you're running these reports that you take a look at that and say, like, okay, you have to sort of detach yourself from the product. If it's not selling, even though you really like it, it's time to let it go.
Mm,
It's either time to let it go or time to discount it. Either way works. Um, but it has to move somewhere, and I feel like the biggest issue with frame board management is people over purchase, and they've been doing it for years.
right.
And they not only do they over purchase the wrong stuff. So I have gone into practices where they have thousands of frames on display, and I'm talking tens of, I mean, a lot of frames.
And they sell 20% of them
Um,
all the time.
I
Maybe
think
not.
they
I
sell
mean, I'm
less.
over exaggerating, but there's a
Yeah,
lot of them that
no,
have been there a long time, I guess is where I'm going with that.
exactly. And
Mm,
my concern is that you have to look at it from the patient's point of view.
right.
When you go into a store like that, you get immediately overwhelmed. It's almost, it's almost suddenly, and you don't really know where to start. And that is a concern when you tie frame board management to sales, because not only is it about buying the right pieces, it's also the overwhelming amount.
Well,
And
there's got to be an element of relationship sales that blur this line. Like you said, looking at the numbers and removing the emotion,
Mhm.
well, that's a wonderful thing in principle. How does it work in reality? I mean, I don't have an answer to this. This is it's a tough line that you have to walk depending on who
Right.
you're dealing with. It isn't cookie cutter, I guess. The numbers are
No.
going to say something, but you're not there to stomp on their emotions for numbers. And you're not
Right.
there to throw
Right.
rocks at any particular frame rep. But
Right. No.
if a frame rep knows that their product isn't moving there, they should be wanting to help you with that too, because they either know something
Exactly.
that they can really help you with, or they don't. I hate to make it so black and white, but that's the truth. You either have frame reps that know, or those that do not, and it's not quite that black and white, but
Exactly.
it's getting close. Um,
Yeah.
you've really hit on frame board management in such a cool way. We had conversations and we talked about setup and, for lack of a better term, post care. Um, how do you do that, or where do you begin? I mean, you've come in and you see they've got 1,000 frames on display, and you can see
Hmm.
massive frame purchases, and there's a disconnect. Uh, like, where do you begin with that? I mean, you have a way to do that setup, and then ultimately
Sure.
remove it to the next step, which is post care, which is so huge and so lacking.
Right. Yeah. I'll say this, like, as a consultant, I'm going to go in there differently than as a framework, right? As a consultant, I would go in there and I'm going to look at all of your collections, not just the one collection.
Right.
So I would go in there, and I'm actually going to work backwards. And we would first sit down and talk about, what do you want your shops or your store or your office's story to be?
Right.
And I feel like a lot of people don't know how to answer that.
What kind of do you get some strange looks? Because anybody in that room who's done anything on social media or any content creation is going to immediately
Hmm.
go, "Oh yeah, you're right," because
Yeah, I
you
mean,
are. You're right. You're completely right.
it's yeah, you can't just, it's not buying to buy, or it's not buying because, oh, this person wants this line in. It's, you really have to look at it and think, how, what do I want my collection to say to people? Do you want to say, like, you know, hey, we have some unique frames? Or do you want to say, we believe in, you know, licensed brands, they do well, we believe in them, and that's what we want to support?
Right.
It's got to say something. But at the same time, you have to look at the brands and say, okay, well, do I need 5 brands that are bread and butter? Like, my line that I primarily rep Oliver Peoples is luxury bread and butter. So you don't need 5 lines that do the same thing.
Right. Right.
If you are a busy practice, I would say 2 bread and butter lines and cut it off at that. Um, I've walked into offices where they've got 20 art focused lines,
Hmm.
artsy lines. And for me personally,
Mm.
I'm confused by that
That's
because
overwhelming. They're trying to hit
I think it's a lot.
everything.
I think it's a lot.
It's a wide.
Or,
It's a wide net. I mean, even and
right.
even if even if you have 5 ophthalmologists and 12
Hmm.
ODs, that problem still exists, which you just
Right.
described.
Right.
Oh, we're going to cast our net so wide that, like you said, we're not defining who we are. I think that's a really, really cool element that is very much overlooked. I even for me, my concepts and my perspectives on frame board management, frame care, what you want for it's all about what they want. So I could fall to what you're saying.
Right.
You know what I mean? I could see myself
Right.
falling into that trap, and
Hmm.
that's that's got to be a challenging conversation to have.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And it's. I think of it as, it's not personal. I'm trying to go in there as a third party and taking a peek at your collection from an outside point of view, because when you're in there day in and day out, it's very easy to say, "Oh, well, this is my collection. It makes sense to me." But does it make sense to the patient, to the consumer, to the person that you want to make a sale to? Does it all, because when it doesn't make sense and they don't know which end is up,
Right.
they're going to have a hard time making a decision.
Yeah, it's, choice overload. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it can be that. I mean, I could, and it certainly is a danger, I would guess, for nearly any multi-doctor practice. I
Right.
mean, it's not, there isn't a real clear way to do it. But I think coming back to connecting with the type of individuals that you are, uh, is huge. In my past, probably, well, yeah, going on 25 years ago now, I worked for 2 ophthalmologists, and there was an also optician owner part in that, it was a really wonderful group. Um,
Hmm.
but they were interesting because I'm trying to think of a not a conflict to do what you're describing, but like an odd situation where the 2 ophthalmologists that were partners, they couldn't be more different. The one guy
Mhm.
looked like he stepped off the farm. He always went to
Mhm.
work that way. Just
Yeah.
jeans. I mean, if you didn't know who he was, you literally would
Mhm.
have not at all thought he was the ophthalmologist there. The other guy couldn't be more opposite.
Mhm.
GQ looking cut to the, I mean,
Mhm.
they were night and day. So in a case like that, it was smart for them to have the optician because that's the guy who can define what you said. That's the guy who can bring his identity forward. And they let
Mhm.
that happen, which was another thing that was really wonderful about that group. They really were in strong contact with a husband and wife who were opticians, who were able to put
Mhm.
their brand on what they did. And they were in two different locations. It was a really nice, solid, functioning partnership that moved
Right.
into the insurance age pretty well. I think,
Mhm.
and as far as I know, they're still rolling, along the way
Yeah.
they do things. Um,
Yeah.
but so in that case, they had a scenario where they could do that identity from the owner's end through the optician kind of thing, but
Right.
that's not everywhere, and
No.
obviously this is a bridge that is probably really weird to cross when we're talking about equity optical like we have had, and we won't go too far down that road, but that's a
Sure.
how do I mean, obviously we know how they brand, but
Right.
from the inside out, what is there, and how is that put forward? I'm not suggesting that they don't have any of that because there are, and a crew says an awful lot about it. I've been in an America's Best. I've been in VisionWorks locations where the crew was so warm you felt it the minute you walked in the door.
Mhm.
I felt that in BJ's Opticals too. Sam's Club. Costco.
Mhm.
It's 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 the human element that is so
Right.
huge to that. And the trainability of that, and I'm going to connect this right back to what you and I totally agreed on, and that was lab finishing training as being a wonderful place to begin your schooling or understanding of being an optician. So I'm going to let you elaborate a little bit more on that, but I love it. I think it's huge.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. I agree with you. I think that there can be multiple ways to cross train if you have a lab tech that wants to learn how to be more of an optician, or vice versa. You have an optician that wants to know how to cut lenses, and there are situations where this is probably one of the best situations is somebody who started as a greeter or as a receptionist and they moved into an optician role,
Cool
because of the strong customer service
skills.
skills that they provided.
Yeah.
So that yeah, that is something that I work on as well, is cross training different positions for people.
I think that's huge, and I think it's so cool how a lot of times people will gravitate to what they're interested in. So if you've got a front desk person that you just keep finding sniffing around nose pads and lensometers and stuff, it's like, go with this. Don't
Right.
don't
Exactly.
don't
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 hold them back.
yeah, don't exactly. Don't hold back. Let's but
Right.
notice it.
Mhm.
In my safety career, I was blown away to find out that some huge juggernaut employers in different regions do this. I
Mhm.
mean, huge, ones that employ tens of thousands
Mhm.
in a region,
Sure.
they will look for what you are interested in and they will
Mhm.
help guide you. And I think that's really cool because there's so many places that as an employee, that's just not the case, that no one's paying attention to what you
Right.
are interested in as a human being. That you're just there to do something and get it done and get it done on time. But starting with finishing work, and you mentioned this, there's just a level of understanding about um what lies ahead of you as an optician face to face when you're looking at prescriptions and frames and
Right.
recommendations in life and things like that that connect in a different way. Um,
Sure. Yeah, and I personally started that way. I
right.
started
Me too. Yep.
more in the lab than I did on the floor, and
Right.
I, eventually made my way onto the floor, and I succeeded at that as well. Primarily because I have a very strong technical background.
Right.
and people were not used to opticians that had that, and they really gravitated uh, towards me because I had that knowledge.
W-
And
Was edging easy for you at 14? Was it easy or
yes,
yeah, see that's cool.
um,
None of it was easy for me at first. I had to well, it wasn't all thumbs, but it
right.
definitely, you know, it took a while for me to be I started surfacing and then learned to finish. And,
Hmm.
and I think that was good too in some ways, for the time,
Sure.
for the time frame. But lab work, yeah, my first 5 years, it's almost all I did was lab work. I mean, it
Yeah.
was fun to get out and engage people once in a while, but it's nothing I wanted to do full time.
Right.
We
Exactly.
had our own little lab thing going, and that worked well. I mean, and it was a different group of people than the people that
Hmm.
were out front. This I'm reflecting on the large staff lens crafters days, but these places exist. The Pearl Visions. I'm sure you've seen places that have. I mean, Chicago, we know there's oodles of ophthalmology groups that have, you know, 15, 20 people working at one location, if not more, and then they've got other locations as well, you know.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, how, like, how to get, how do you take somebody who is interested, who's got a lab history and is interested in the face to face or shows interest in it? How do you, how do you coach them to go more face to face, I guess?
Sure. Honestly, the best way is to really hone in on their personality and their customer service skills,
Mm,
because you can teach a lab person how to choose the right lens fairly easily because they already have some of that knowledge.
right.
Uh, it's more, how do you deal with certain customer service situations,
Mm,
and how do you then you can go into frame styling and all of that, but that will also come pretty naturally because of their background in the lab. They see what frames come through the door, they see what lenses go in which frame. But I feel like the biggest hurdle is really getting to that customer service side.
it is something you've got to get into to learn. It's one of those things, like falling off your bike. I mean, you're gonna do it. Um, But that no, that you brought up an interesting element that I do think of from time to time, but I don't really know how to translate it in a smooth way. But it's let's say you've got a for instance where the same individual is in the lab, and for the third
Hmm.
time, the lab just sent back this job incorrectly. Yeah, you're obviously going to express a few things in the lab,
Right.
hopefully differently than you would express them face to face in front of a patient.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
so, you know,
Yeah.
that's a nuance, like you're saying, that you've got to sort of recognize, but it's also
Right.
very coachable. People get that
Right.
because they've been on the
Hmm.
other end of that somewhere at some point in
Sure.
time, and from a service standpoint, and that's
Yeah.
huge. I mean, but I'm thinking to myself, like, I do remember being young and coming out and having a tantrum, and all I did was escalate it. All I
Hmm.
did was take a bad situation and make it worse for them, and I couldn't understand why people were mad at me. All I did was go out and
Yeah.
express my anger.
Right. No, exactly. No, you need to put a positive spin on the
Right,
situation.
uh, right.
Um, you know.
To look for it,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
and because when you're looking for it, it's noticed, and it is
Hmm.
felt. I think, you know.
Right.
It your clients, I'm going to come back to this briefly before we wrap this up, but your clients are primarily, Stark, Alon Mickley, your Oliver Peoples line. um they they see expenditure differently
Hmm.
into their practice. um
Hmm.
Explain that from somebody who's more thrifty. Like, what is the
Sure.
explain that mindset difference and how you relate it to yourself in terms of being a sales rep.
Sure, absolutely. Um, I'll start to say that I specialize in luxury. I've spent the last 11 years in luxury.
Right,
So I personally have a different mindset as well.
right.
Um, I believe that if you sell a higher end product, yes, it is more expensive, but you get that return with the sale as well. Your sale numbers will be higher. Um, and the other thing is you're not going to deal with as many issues
That's
as
to me,
you would.
that's huge. When the
It
product
is.
goes out the door, they're not coming
It
back.
doesn't come
When they come back,
right.
they're buying more.
Right. Exactly.
Win-win.
Exactly. You don't want, the patient to say, "Hey, this broke after 6 months or a year." Who wants to deal with that?
No.
Because yes, it may have been cheaper, but then you're remaking lenses. You're ordering a new frame for that patient. You're ordering a new part, whatever. You're fixing it. All of that is time and money, and people don't necessarily think about that. Like, if you have a low cost brand with a spring hinge, and that spring hinge breaks in 3 months,
Right.
it doesn't look very good.
Nope.
It's a reflection on your practice. And then they have to take time out of their day and come back, and nobody wants to do that.
Right.
And then you have to take time out of your day to fix their problem. And what you're not noticing at the time is other people who are in that store
See it.
are watching this,
Yes.
and their grip on their wallet just got tighter and tighter and tighter until they walk out.
I I slightly downplayed a previous interview at the very end where a friend of mine just came back with, "Look, word of mouth is the winner all
Mm-hmm.
the time." He's
Mm-hmm.
and I do tend to downplay it because of tech and because of the numbers and the new vases you can see and all the amazing technology that's available to a practice. Consultants can bring waves of new people to your door. Well, what good is that if you don't
Mm-hmm.
know how to handle them or you don't have the staff or the ability to do it? Now
Right.
now you've just created a bad situation. So,
Right.
these things need to be understood from top to bottom before decisions are made and
Right.
before a practice decides, how much blah 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 means to them. Because
Mm-hmm.
if certain, everybody has bottom line to something. But
Mm-hmm.
you and I understand that quantification for expertise, for knowledge, for superior understanding
Mm-hmm.
is totally huge and worth it. I mean,
Right.
and then let's connect the disconnect. They've got an Oliver, people's frame, and the opticians are swamped, and they're looking around
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, I don't know if I want this one or that one, and okay, so I guess I'm going to be waiting 20 minutes, And the reality is that there are ways, just like IC clearly has, amongst others,
Mm-hmm.
to take that engagement remote, and that is another component that we've we've used up our time, but it really is the crux of what I try to do, but
Sure.
not
Yeah.
not
Absolutely.
not just it isn't for everywhere. It works
Mm-hmm.
well, when you do have a kit of those that is sitting on the right coffee table at the right time and the right frame
Mm-hmm.
styling session is taking place, and there's three other
Right.
lawyers watching it. It's now that practice is picking up the patients it wants to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't do anything other than send a kit out the door with awesome
Right.
frames in it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So, the system's there. It's just that these systems,
Right.
em- embracing those systems, putting them to use in the right way, in the right environments, is just beginning to take place right now. So, this is such an exciting time for me to be involved with it and see it from the meat, straight on up.
Sure.
Because you see it. People are suffering with the loss of sales, not just online,
Yes.
but scripts are
Everywhere.
walking. Scripts are walking at a
Yeah.
rate that they never did. So
Right.
it is a
And we need to keep
reality.
that. Yeah.
And the truth is that there are answers to it. So, and we've just
Mm-hmm.
begun to touch on some of them. So, This has been a
Oh, exactly.
wonderful conversation. I really appreciate your time and explaining a little bit more about what you do at the individual level, at the personal level. You know what Hill Optical Consultants is able to bring to a practice, and also to integrate the sales rep knowledge with that
Hmm.
as what practices are doing, what um, the wins, the losses, because it isn't for everyone. There are practices that should remain catering who they have.
Yes.
You don't need to go in and upset the apple cart. But if
No.
you've got a bunch of dead frame board space, Nathan's here to fix that for you. So go that route.
Right.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful. If anything that we've discussed here has resonated with anyone here, please contact icclearly.com and click on the info at icclearly.com and send me an email. We'll have a brief discussion, a phone call, and decide if it's a good fit. We'll talk about other options for your practice as well. Thank you so much, Nathan. Take good care, everybody.